Come see us doing live shows. We'll be in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only jimmydore.com. Here's a fun story. It says how the U.S. media helped the Biden administration distance itself from the horrors of Gaza. Well, how did it do that? An analysis of press coverage of the first year of the siege, bombing, and invasion of Gaza reveals a U.S. media eager to produce narratives that allow the White House to distance itself from the moral, social, political, and professional consequences of their support for Israel. White House and State Department reporters at major U.S. outlets consistently took self-serving claims by anonymous aides at face value, did not interrogate clear conflicts of interest, and focused too much on alleged personality disputes, unverifiable states of mind, and assumed benevolent motives over material policy. The distancing of the White House from the carnage in Gaza is achieved through three reporting genres: helpless Biden, whoa, you can't do anything; fuming, deeply concerned Biden, he's upset with Bibi; and third partying. What is third partying? Helpless Biden is any report, analysis, or opinion that describes Biden as unable to do anything to stop Israel from committing war crimes or end the war overall. Of course, he could just cut off their arms supply. He could do that. This is typically framed as a limit to U.S. power, often accompanied with a picture of Biden looking overwhelmed, sad, or doddering. These are sourced almost entirely by anonymous Biden aides and Biden allies in the think tank world. Fuming, deeply concerned Biden is any report, analysis, or opinion that paints Biden as secretly upset, outraged, or privately sad or anguished about civilian casualties. These articles are also sourced almost entirely by anonymous Biden aides and Biden allies in the think tank world. Third partying is a variation of an anti-labor propaganda concept whereby corporations treat unions as somehow separate from workers and worker democracy in order to portray unions as an outside third party. Just the same, media reports consistently paint the United States as separate from the conflict, despite its being the major patron of one side, deploying troops, military hardware, assisting in military operations, providing intel, and protecting Israel at the United Nations. The U.S. media consistently frames the United States as a neutral party, even a humanitarian force, always looking but mysteriously always failing to end the conflict. This is typically done through coverage of largely fictitious ceasefire talks, where U.S. media conflates efforts for a short-term pause for the purpose of hostage exchange with ending the war. Note that the Biden White House could, and indeed still can, end Israel's bombing siege and occupation of Gaza whenever it wishes, and simply isn't because it broadly agrees with it. The evidence that Biden has sufficient leverage to compel Israel to end its military campaign in Gaza is well documented and widely understood. 7 U.S.-based unions representing 6 million workers, the AFA, the APW, IUPAT, the SEIU, the UAW, the UE, and the NEA, and over 250 humanitarian organizations, among them Oxfam, Amnesty International, Save the Children, and Doctors Without Borders, have called for an arms embargo against Israel pursuant to this end. And Israel officials themselves routinely acknowledge that such leverage gives the United States dispositive say over what the Israelis do and don't do. In the early days of the war, critics pressed Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant about why Israel agreed to allow unlimited humanitarian aid to Gaza. He responded, "The Americans insisted, and we are not in a place where we can refuse them. We rely on them for planes and military equipment. What are we supposed to do? Tell them no?" So it shows you how much power the United States has, but never exercises. The Financial Times wrote in October 25th editorial, U.S. President Joe Biden must end the year-long cycle of death and destruction. Biden has the tools to rein in Netanyahu. He must halt the offensive arms sales to Israel that enable its relentless bombing of Gaza and Lebanon. But he won't. But most persuasive of all is the fact that a good portion of the articles we will be discussing that suggest Biden is helpless to end Israel's military campaign concede themselves that Biden can do this, but simply doesn't want to. But he's moral. Yet these articles breeze past this reality, burying it in the "to be sure" paragraph further down on the page, or treating it as a polemic guesswork from critics of the administration. Secondly, those in the Biden White House have obvious professional, social, political, and moral reasons for wanting to promote the idea that the daily atrocities occurring in Gaza are not something they are responsible for. On this premise, Israel has been credibly accused of war crimes by Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, widely condemned by almost every country on earth, and credibly accused of plausible genocide by the International Court of Justice, and of outright genocide by Arya Nair, a co-founder of Human Rights Watch. Our first genre is helpless Biden. Our study analyzed 10 prominent examples of the helpless Biden genre. And so here they are. There's more, all from the New York Times, Washington Post. Our source analysis shows that 93% of the sources of these articles are Israeli officials, Biden aides, typically anonymous, or Biden allies in think tank world. The three most common sources being cited were the White House officials, Israeli officials, or aides. In none of these pieces was the idea that Biden is powerless or ever meaningfully questioned. To the extent that it is broached at all, it is typically in a "to be sure" paragraph quoting critics or Arab and Muslim Americans, then hand-waved away or dismissed via what is, in effect, circular reasoning, as in Biden can't end Israel's military campaign because he doesn't want to. Companion to helpless Biden is fuming, deeply concerned Biden. This is any report, analysis, or opinion that paints Biden as secretly upset, outraged, having stern words for Netanyahu, or privately sad or anguished about civilian casualties. And here they all are. NBC, CNN, Axios, it's all garbage. Associated Press, Politico. Our source analysis shows that nearly 98% of the sources of these articles are Israeli officials or ex-officials, Biden aides, typically anonymous, or Biden allies in think tank world. The most common source, we just showed you that. Despite the fact that there have been dozens of these articles ostensibly detailing how angry, disappointed, or concerned for civilians Biden is behind closed doors, no reporter finds it suspicious that Biden refuses to use any of his available leverage to stop the thing he's allegedly so upset about. Third partying is a PR tactic used by the White House, but it also should be understood as a standard reporting practice driven by media chauvinism that simply takes for granted, as a matter of course, that the United States' motives are peace-seeking in nature, despite the fact that the United States is an active participant in the frickin' conflict. And here's all those kind of stories. Biden team sees narrow window for deal and ceasefire. Blinken turns up pressure on Hamas. Biden's push to end the war in Gaza. These are October 18th. Hamas says its demands are unchanged as Biden pushes for ceasefire. The destruction of Gaza is in its 14th month and worsens by the day. Understanding how U.S. media outlets continue to paint a participant in the siege and bombing of Gaza as a separate, reluctant humanitarian force is essential in shifting the focus off coverage away from self-serving leaks, personality disputes, court intrigue, and presumed humanitarian motives into the more concrete, skeptical, policy-driven coverage typically reserved for states hostile to United States interests. There are thousands of examples in the U.S. media of editors taking for granted that the United States is earnestly seeking a peace deal, truce, or a ceasefire, but simply can't bring Israel or Hamas to agree to terms. This despite the fact that, as we have established, the United States can simply impose a ceasefire on Israel whenever it chooses to. Take this example from CBS News in January of this year. Here it is. Watch this.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken is en route to the Middle East again, his fourth trip there since fighting between Israel and Hamas broke out on October 7th. The State Department says Blinken is aiming to prevent the conflict from spreading while expanding humanitarian aid and reducing civilian casualties. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it has completely dismantled Hamas's military framework in northern Gaza. CBS's Ian Lee has the latest from Tel Aviv.
Good evening, Robert. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Turkey to a Middle East in trouble. He'll be playing the role of firefighter as he tries to extinguish the conflicts popping up in the region.
He's trying to stop this as he gives them the weapons to keep doing it. He's really stopping it. He's playing the role of firefighter as he gives them gasoline and matches.
The worst fighting in Israel's north in nearly 20 years risks a new war. Today, Lebanese militants Hezbollah fired more than 60 rockets across the border. Israel responded with punishing airstrikes and artillery. Hezbollah says its attack is revenge for the assassination of a top Hamas commander in Beirut this week. In Yemen's capital, Iranian-backed Houthi rebels remain defiant in the face of Washington's warning to stop attacking commercial shipping. We will make the sea as we made the land, a graveyard for America and Israel, says this man. Today, the U.S. Navy announced it shot down a Houthi drone near multiple ships, and CBS News has learned the Pentagon is preparing plans to hit back at the Houthis, including strikes against targets in Yemen. Hamas's brutal attack 3 months ago sparked the crisis.
Yes.
In southern
Not the occupation for 75 years. That didn't spark the crisis. Okay. All right.
Gaza, Israeli forces advance. Their main focus now is Khan Yunis. Airstrikes pound the city. Nearby, Palestinians dig a new cemetery. The old ones are already full. Israeli troops hunt for Hamas in southern Gaza while searching for hostages. Gal Dalal attended the Nova Music Festival with his brother Guy when the militants attacked.
What is it like coming back here?
It's a weird feeling.
Gal got away, Guy didn't. Taken by Hamas. Time now stands still with his brother in captivity.
My brother is the whole world for me, and I will see him again, I know it.
More than 100 hostages remain in Gaza, Robert, including 6 Americans. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will...
So they're focusing on the 100 hostages, not the thousands of people who are imprisoned in Palestinians in prison in Israel, or at this point in January of this year, 40-some thousand dead Palestinians, the majority of them women and children. But this Jagoff reporter is who's he focusing on? He's focusing on, the poor Israelis. That's what he's doing. It's amazing.
Work for their release while also pushing to get more desperately needed humanitarian aid into Gaza.
The United States.
Thank you, Ian Lee.
The United States, they're not part of it. See, you see how they report it? The United States isn't actually doing it, which they are. They're the ones trying to stop it. They're pushing for humanitarian aid. They're pushing for a stop and a ceasefire. They're not doing anything. For too long, the Biden White House and its Israeli think tank allies have curated an image of an administration, and it's over its head. Largely powerless, motivated by humanitarian concerns, separate from the images and reports of human suffering in Gaza. This report seeks to rectify this media convention. This report here seeks to rectify this media convention. Ask editors to question why Biden allies are so eager to reinforce this image and implore editors and reporters to refocus coverage on what the Biden White House is supporting as a matter of policy rather than transcribe the president's supposed mood, reports of pending breaks in the U.S.-Israel relationship that never come, and tense phone calls and other journalistic frivolities. So that's a good... Who wrote this in The Nation? This is a good... I should give them credit. This is a good article. Adam Johnson and Atman Ali. So good job by Adam Johnson and Atman Ali. I don't know that Atman Ali. I know Adam Johnson. He's got a personality disorder, but he did do a good job on this. So he's often on the wrong side of issues. Forced to vote was one of them. But good job on this. Come see us doing live shows. We'll be in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only jimmydore.com.